When I review a camera, like I am here with the Nikon Zf, I'm gonna compare it to others, especially cameras that I've used extensively and those that I know a lot of people own for a few reasons. One, because it gives you a solid point of reference. If you own or know some of Sony's cameras or the Fujifilm X100VI well, hopefully you can better envision what I'm saying when I compare them to the Nikon Zf. I also compare cameras because from an objective standpoint, they're all good now. Like, cameras pushing 10 or 15 years old can still crank out incredible raw images to work with. And certainly just about anything in the last 5 or 6 years, whether it's APS-C or full frame or even some micro four thirds options, they're all going to produce fantastic image quality. Most cameras will have great autofocus, and now most also have higher end video capabilities. Things like 10-bit log recording, once a rarity, are now a common practice on even the most budget friendly of camera bodies. So if I don't compare cameras, and not just specs, but the little things within the shooting experience and how they perform in different scenarios, I don't know, I just don't think I'd be giving you enough information. Plus, the Nikon Zf is about 2 years old now, so I also want to give you something beyond the basics that have been pretty well covered by now. Anyway, welcome back to the channel, everyone. I'm Chris Hagen, a video producer and photographer in Portland, Oregon, and with a big thanks to Nikon USA, I've had 2 months with the Zf now. Depending on when I'm able to finally post this video, I may have needed to send it back to Nikon by now, but I also may have already purchased one for myself. We'll see, because in this video we'll break down who this camera's for and if someone like me that owns other full frame cameras and a Fujifilm X100VI should make room for it in the kit, or if it could replace anything. We'll also go over features I do and don't miss compared to other cameras, some of the straight out of camera JPEG colors, and talk about why the Zf is so significant within Nikon's camera lineup. But spoiler alert, with every passing day from when I got the camera in late May to when I sadly needed to ship it back, I appreciated this thing more and more. Let's start with design, and one of the features that really caught me off guard with how much I appreciated it: the Viewfinder. I had the Zf for 2 months and made it my daily photo camera, but I made sure to check back in with my Sony a7 IV and Fujifilm X100VI to try to check my bias and remind myself that those are also great cameras. But the first time I put the X100 Viewfinder up to my eye after using the Zf for a few weeks, my first thought was, I can't see anything. Now that's a slight exaggeration, but seriously, I never recalled thinking that when going back and forth between my a7 IV and X100VI, despite the a7 IV having nearly identical viewfinder specs, the same 3.69 million dot resolution and a 0.78 times magnification on the Sony versus 0.8 on the Nikon. So my conclusion, it's got to be the shape, and indeed the Zf viewfinder is large and comfortable. Maybe I just need to turn the brightness up or something on my a7 IV, but in general, the viewfinder experience on the Zf was a clear winner for me and a big part of what made the shooting experience so good. Something else that caught me by surprise is how much I did not miss having a joystick. Having had my eye on the Nikon Zf for a while before using it, I was just sure that I would miss that feature, since it's where my thumb usually goes immediately on my a7 IV and X100VI while shooting. But honestly, it didn't take that long to get used to positioning the focus box with the directional pad instead of a joystick. In fact, when I picked up my a7 IV after using the Zf for a while, I kept trying to use its D-pad to move the focus. So if that's a worry for you about switching to or from any camera system, just give yourself a little more credit. We're more adaptable than we think, so try not to worry as much about something like that before using the camera for yourself. Last thing when it comes to design, because I did talk about it a good bit already in my first impressions video, I'll just revisit the weight and size of this camera and say I just wasn't that bothered by it, at least with the 40mm f2 lens. It's not light, but I also wouldn't consider it to be too heavy to bring everywhere with me. Daily outings, hiking, really all the things. The size and design never stopped me from wanting to bring the Zf out of the house. And when making photos in public, it never attracted unwanted attention, and I don't think it made anyone uncomfortable. And I do think that matters, especially when capturing candid moments is just kind of nice to be a little bit more under the radar and not in some secret spy trying to snipe a picture kind of way. Just if I'm capturing a scene at a coffee shop or park or wherever, I don't want it to feel like I'm shooting an event with a more in-your-face or obvious setup. Now, normally I would save the who is this camera for takes until the end of a review, but I think it makes more sense to work it into the shooting experience as we go and just sum it all up later. To me, the ZF sits somewhere in between the photography first design of a Fujifilm X series camera and a hybrid full frame camera like the Sony a7 IV, or in Nikon's lineup, the Z6 III or Z5 II, which is somehow less expensive than the ZF. Conversation for another day, because that's probably the best overall deal in full frame right now. Anyway, the ZF on paper and in practice is just as capable for daily casual photography as any camera in its class. The 24 megapixels are plenty. The autofocus is just about up there with my a7 IV, and certainly a huge step up from Fujifilm. And from what I can tell, it feels just as fast to use as any other camera that I've ever owned. I would also confidently and honestly say that if I were shooting professional paid work with this camera, I'd be just fine. And I think a lot of people would be for a few reasons. For me, there's nothing that my a7 IV does that I can't do with the ZF shooting events, portraits, headshots, you name it. Especially knowing that I'm gonna edit the photos, maybe I'm even more confident shooting with the ZF because I think it performs a lot better in low light. With the right lens and a grip, I'm good to go. The speed and autofocus are there, and even shooting manually, I've gotten pretty quick adjusting the ISO dial on the go with my left hand while making changes to the aperture and shutter with the right. Again, we can all adapt. The ZF body doesn't have all the custom buttons that my a7 IV does. It's probably just only a few short now that I'm thinking about it, but I just don't need them for what I'd be shooting with this camera. So in the world of photography, who would I say this is for? Anyone that wants a stylish body to go along with their camera setup, and someone that understands the few limitations the camera has and how to work with them. For example, one could knock the ZF for having just one SD card slot, but you do also get a micro SD card slot, and what I've done is just set my camera to record the JPEGs and RAWs to both cards. I put a 128 gigabyte V30 micro card in and just left it there. You know, this is actually a reminder to myself to take it out before I send the camera back to Nikon. I'll probably still forget. I just leave the card in and it basically acts as internal memory for me because I've only taken it out once. And that was just the one time that I forgot to put the SD card back in, and it saved me from being caught without a card in public. So it does its job well. You could also take points away from the ZF for not having menu banks, basically preset custom settings that you can quickly change to with the flip of a switch. On my a7 IV and on Nikon's more hybrid bodies, you have that option. Where does it come in handy? Well, maybe you want to set one bank to shoot full frame and another to shoot APS-C mode for a little extra reach, or maybe you're going inside and outside, back and forth at an event and want to set one bank to a daylight white balance and another to something more suitable for artificial lighting. User banks would come in handy for those situations, but the I information menu, I think, can be just as handy. It can be organized with a ton of different functions in whatever order you like. And the way I've set mine up is I have set picture control right next to white balance since they're my most frequently changed settings. I also have some focus settings, the release mode to change between single frame or continuous shooting, and plenty of options that I can access with one button press and a few turns of my dials. And once you use the camera for about a week, it starts to just become second nature. It's not one single twist of a dial to change all of these settings at once like you would have with a memory bank, but it also doesn't take an act of Congress to make changes while shooting either. So again, not worried about this camera slowing me down if I were to ever make it a main driver for photos. For video, if I was invested in the Nikon system and filming was the primary use case, I'd probably be looking at the Z6 III instead, just based on the much faster sensor readout speed and 6K and RAW video capabilities. It just makes more sense. But the ZF, again, is capable, even if it's not really designed, in my opinion, to be a filmmaker's first choice. You don't have a full HDMI port. That's a bit of a bummer, and personally, I do prefer a few more buttons on my video bodies. I find that I need to work faster in a lot of video scenarios, so that's where I am kind of bullish on having features that can be accessed with just 1 or 2 button presses at most, because I really don't want to spend more than a few seconds looking down when I'm locked into filming. But still, I'll say it is a much better experience than filming with the X100VI. Unfortunately, I just didn't have quite enough time to do much dedicated video work with it, but I will with the next Nikon camera that's headed my way. Anyway, just like with photography, you can map quite a number of useful settings to the I menu, and with really solid in-body image stabilization as well, I can't really say anything bad about what the ZF is capable of. It's more than fine for YouTube videos, solo filmmaking, interviews, really anything you'd use a mid-range mirrorless camera for, which is quite a lot these days. Lots of bigger organizations and companies that I've shot for get the job done with less. Personally, I'd just prefer it be my B cam and have something with more of a modern hybrid design as my main camera. I'm really nitpicking though. The ZF can do the same things I ask of my A7 IV when filming things like weddings, usually stabilized via tripod or gimbal. So I am going to get to my thoughts on a few other things, especially JPEG colors and recipes and some other comparisons to Fujifilm and Sony cameras in particular. But on the heels of everything we just talked about with photo and video, I gotta say this. What I like the most about this camera is the concept of this camera and the fact that Nikon made it. It's no secret that they were a little behind Sony and Canon in terms of the mirrorless race. They certainly caught up in a hurry and even passed the competition in a few areas with the releases of the Z9 and Z8, but before making a more affordable powerhouse, the Z6 III, they gave the world the ZF. And honestly, I overlooked it. I feel like a lot of people did. In the midst of the competition coming out with all of these hybrid, modern-looking, loaded camera bodies, you get a retro-styled ZF that's as capable as some of the competition, but it's not necessarily trying to beat the competition or even be in the competition in a good way. It's in its own lane, and I think now it's paying off. How a camera looks and how it feels to use is as important as it's ever been to consumers. We see that with the popularity of film cameras and Fujifilm's X series digital cameras. And instead of rushing out a direct competitor to the Sony a7 IV or Canon R6 or Lumix S5 II, Nikon made the ZF, which is basically a photographer's body through and through, with some video features sprinkled in just because they could. So I just applaud it being an intentional camera and not feeling the need to be a jack of all trades. Now, I did do a full deep dive into Nikon's recipe system compared to Fujifilm, so I highly recommend that you check that out if you're interested in all the nitty-gritty of it. But to keep it a little more brief here, it's a tremendous feature. It wasn't available at the time of the ZF's launch, but Nikon's marketing and the community has done a great job of embracing and elevating it. And it's available on the Z5 II and Z6 III as well, and I think the latest Z8 update also allows the use of the flexible picture control. What's important to note here is that it's a deep system. I like to say it's a nearly Lightroom level of control when it comes to shifting the hue, saturation, and luminance of individual colors, split toning, adjusting contrast, and making specific changes to the tone curve, and a whole lot more. Every day, I see more and more really creative recipes from different users, in addition to those provided online by Nikon creators. Again, if you want to learn more about all those details, check out my video all about it. Compared to Sony, look, I've seen the comments. I know that there are custom looks available. I've lightly dabbled with them within my a7 IV, but the results with Nikon, probably thanks to the ease of use, are just more diverse because you have more control and options. And they went out of their way to dedicate an entire section of their Imaging Cloud website to this feature and promote it. Compared to Fujifilm, I think you can be more creative and have more control with Nikon, but Fuji does have that something special with their film simulations and the colors that you get with that, and there's no denying it. Past that, just edit the photos yourself in post. I think with all the options we've got across a number of brands, we can all be happy. JPEG shooters have it better than ever, with more camera manufacturers finding ways to implement custom looks in camera. And obviously, pros and those who want to edit their photos have no shortage of tools to use either. Expanding a bit on the comparison I just made to Sony and Fujifilm, because those are the brands that I've just done more photography with, I will say that the ZF became my clear favorite for carrying every day. Like I mentioned earlier in the video, I made sure to keep the A7 IV and X100VI in the rotation throughout my time with the ZF. On a recent trip to the Oregon coast, I brought all 3 cameras. Definitely overkill, but I was working on a review of an E-mount lens, and the Fujifilm is just so compact that it does no harm to just throw it in the bag too. But my own decision making told me everything I needed to know. Once I had enough of what I needed to put the E-mount lens through its paces, I was done using the A7 IV, and the X100VI made just one appearance pretty briefly during some beautiful late afternoon lighting. It was the ZF that came with me to Cannon Beach for what I knew would be some of the best photos of the trip, both during daytime and golden hour, and beyond sunset when the light was essentially gone. From shooting with the ZF and the compact 40mm prime lens to working with the RAW files, I just knew it would deliver exactly what I wanted. Parts of the sunset turned into an impromptu portrait session for me and a group of friends, and I remember one of them, who's a photographer himself, saying, "Man, how do your photos look like that?" And all we were doing was looking at the back of the camera. In fact, beyond the beach, as we made our way into the forest later in the weekend for some hiking, the ZF remained my go-to choice. The autofocus accuracy was spot on. It was also easy for me to hand the camera off to people who'd never used it and actually get some photos of myself for once. And not even 5 miles with lots of elevation with the camera either in hand or around my neck affected me. I truly do not mind the size of the ZF for carrying for long periods of time or daily in my bag or over my neck. It just checks every box every time. And look, that's not to say that I couldn't get a bunch of images I really like with the other cameras too. It just really surprised me how much more I reached for the ZF over my X100VI, even just around the house and around town grabbing little family moments the last few months. I think it's the little things like handling and autofocus and better low light performance that I now realize weigh more into my decision making when picking up a camera. I think I like the Fujifilm straight out of camera colors a little bit more, and when they hit hard. But if I know I'm editing the photos or I'm going to be shooting in any situation where lighting is just more difficult and therefore I won't want just the JPEGs, it's the ZF for me. So I'll end with this, the question of, should you buy it? Not because I think what I say should hold much weight on your purchasing decision, but because I want to offer perspective and where I sit on the matter for myself. If you're in the market for an everyday camera, and especially if you're planning on shooting with some prime lenses that fit the look of the ZF, and even if you're going to rock a reasonably sized zoom lens, I think it's a great option, especially if you're not too deep into another ecosystem of lenses and accessories. If you're considering getting into the Fujifilm system and you've come across the ZF while doing your research, I think it's worth putting on your short list. It's a little bit larger than most Fujifilm cameras, and that has turned a lot of people away, but it's also more capable in terms of speed and performance and autofocus accuracy. And being full frame does unlock some bonuses like low light performance and a more shallow depth of field when you want it. If you're someone who is not going to edit their photos and you're swept up into the hype of Fujifilm, just know that you can get great colors straight out of the camera with the ZF. They're probably not going to look like Fujifilm colors, but that doesn't necessarily make them any worse or better. It just comes down to preference. I think the creator community and the recipes being made are just getting started. And if Nikon ever added an option to add some grain to the JPEGs, they would really win a lot more people over. But also, don't ever buy a camera based on if a feature comes. Nikon has been great about supporting their cameras with firmware updates, but nothing's ever really promised. Finally, to those who might be in my shoes, you're bought into another full frame system already, but you like the look, the idea, and the performance of the ZF. Does it make sense to pick up a camera in a completely different ecosystem? Maybe. Think about it like Fujifilm's X100VI. It's a $1,600 camera that sells for even more on the used market, and lots of photographers pick it up as their fun, fixed lens, don't have to think about it, just go shoot camera. Why couldn't the Nikon Zf with a small prime lens be used the same way? Especially when you consider that its retro feel, similar to a lot of Fujifilm options, gives it that same casual, approachable feeling. Also, Nikon Z-mount is highly adaptable. If I were to pick up a ZF, you better believe I'm getting an adapter and putting my 35mm G Master on it too. But sensibly, I just need to look at selling off some gear to make all of that work, mainly because I just don't need any cameras collecting dust. And if you're gonna edit your photos, as much as I do love the ZF, I can get images that I also love out of what I have right now. But if the right things line up, AKA I sell enough stuff and the wife approves adding another camera, I'll be getting the Nikon ZF because I honestly enjoy it that much, as you can tell throughout this video. I know I've gushed about it quite a bit, and honestly, it was a lot more than I thought I would, but it really is that great of a camera in my opinion, especially when it's less than $2,000. All right, that is that. Thank you for taking this probably pretty lengthy ride with me. I love hearing your opinion, so let me know. How are you using the ZF? Are you mainly shooting on another system, but using the ZF as your more casual camera? Or is that even a thing? Are cameras just tools to you and you don't care how a camera looks as long as it captures the photos how you want it to? Or do you use it professionally as part of your Nikon kit, maybe as a B or C cam? I'm always curious. I'll see you in the comments, and I'll see you in the next video.